Hi and welcome back. Ollie from the Crafty Whisk here. Today we're going into part 3 of our pop-up gift card cards. We've gone through part 1 and then part 2 and now we're up to part 3 and you've stuck with me. Good on you. Part 3 is my favourite. It's a really good 3D version pop-up. So I hope you're going to enjoy it as much as I have. I've tried to make it as easy as possible. There are quite a few different versions of this out on the internet. And I've tried to make it as seamless as possible. So let's get started. This is the actual mechanism here. And I've made it out of one piece of paper rather than 2 separate boxes, which is the version that you'll predominantly see everywhere on YouTube. You need a lightweight piece of paper preferably. And you just get it from, your 6x6 little scrapbook paper packets. And you need to start with a piece which is 4 1/4 by 6. And then we score that. So you might need to freeze this or pause it at 1/2 inch, 1 1/4 inches, 1 3/4, 2 1/2, 3 1/2, 4 1/4, 4 3/4, and 5 1/2. And you score it, if you're using a patterned piece of paper, on the right side or the pattern side of the piece of paper that you're using. It is preferable to use a thinner style of paper rather than a thicker. I will show you how to use a thicker style in the second version that I show you, but the thinner style is much easier to work with and much less bulky. So once you've scored it, you flip it over and then you need to burnish all of your score lines. You need to do this quite well so that the actual mechanism works correctly. Once you've done this, on the 2 very edge pieces, you need to put some double-sided tape. You can use either your red line tape or double-sided tape or score tape. It doesn't really matter. Now this is the trickiest bit of all. You fold that bit back along the first score line and then you miss the next score line and fold it up onto the 3rd score line. And then turn the paper around. So you bring it up on the 1st score line, remove the adhesive strip, miss the 2nd score line, fold it up on the 3rd. The 2 should then meet in the middle, but do not overlap them. There should be a tiny, tiny, tiny gap. They should just butt up against each other. And then you just gently maneuver them into a box shape, and that creates your 2 boxes. And then just gently move them one way, burnish it, and then maneuver it the opposite way and burnish it like you're opening and closing the card. This just ensures the mechanism will work correctly when the card opens and closes. In the centre of the boxes is where your gift card is going to go. I found this way much easier than creating two separate boxes and then trying to align them correctly. And here I'm trying to find the gift card. I've been making that many gift cards that I misplaced the gift card. Well, it's actually not a gift card, but it's a loyalty card, but it's the same kind of thing. So to keep the gift card in place, we need to use some strong adhesive here. So either use glue very carefully or 1/4 of an inch wide tape. So I'm using the red liner tape, and you just use it where the two boxes come together. On the sides, on the edges of the sides there. And then bring the two boxes together, burnish it down so that when you pop your gift card in, it won't fall out. Like so. And that's the mechanism. So this suits a top folding card. So the actual card itself is a basic top folding card where the base is 11 by 4 1/4, scored in half at 5 1/2. You can decorate it any way that you want to. I'm just going to use a stencil and ink over the top of it. This is actually a cookie stencil by Stencilbelle from my cake decorating days. I'm just putting a scrap piece of paper underneath rather than drag out all of the other things that I have, and I'm just using Distress Oxide, and it's antique linen. And I'm using a low tack tape. This one's from Heffy Doodle, just to keep the stencil in place. You can use a magnetic platform if you've got a magnetic platform. I'm just showing you the alternative if you don't have the magnetic platform. I'm just grabbing my sponge applicator. I'm using a domed sponge, and I just want a tone on tone look, so I'm just going quite lightly over the top. And I'm not being too fussy because it is just a very general background. I only want a very soft muted look. And you can use a brush as well, whatever your preference is with tools. And don't throw the tape away, you can reuse the tape. So that's the tone on tone look there. And to clean the stencil, I'm just using a microfiber cloth which is dampened with water, or you can run it under the sink tap. Or you can use a baby wipe, whatever you've got to hand. The flowers are the ones I used left over from part 2's tutorial from the Altenew set of Wispy Joy. So that one in the center, that's the wild rose color that I did the tone on tone technique. You can see how it really does settle down. And I did the tone on tone technique with the yellow one as well. And I'm just going to zippity-doo-dah quite quickly through the layering process. I'm using a mixture again of the 1mm loft dots from Snazzy Scrappin' and the 2mm loft foam dots. So I get a mixture of heights with the flowers. So some are in the background and some are in the foreground. It creates another level of interest rather than them all being flat in the background. And the ones at the very, very back, I just glue down. And once again, we don't worry about the leaves that hang off the edge. You can either use a bigger envelope or I just trim it off and then I pop it underneath another part of the floral. So it looks like it was meant to be there all the time. Now the sentiment on this one, I'm using another set from Altenew called Seasonal Blooms. This one has some really lovely sentiments in it. I'm just conditioning the stamp with my fingers because I haven't actually used this stamp before. And I'm just using the VersaFine because it gives a nice crisp black image. And I love the quality of the Altenew stamps. It's the very first time I've used that stamp and look at how beautifully that's stamped out. Absolutely magnificent. You really do pay for what you get. And again, it's a new stamp set, so I haven't actually put everything on the magnet backing yet. Again, on my to-do list. I'm waiting on a new shipment of magnet sheets to come through from Amazon. And these sentiments come with the dies as well. And I actually want to lift this sentiment up a little bit on the card because the flowers are raised. So I want to raise this sentiment up as well. So I'm actually going to cut the sentiment out, or the shadow of the sentiment out 3 times out of plain white cardstock. Thanks to the magic of television. Ta-da! And I like to keep one of the cutout pieces in with the dies for another technique which I'll go through in another video later on down the track. There's a reason I keep that in there. So I'm just stacking the die cuts on top of one another because this is a little bit too tricky to put foam dots in behind. You'd be fiddling around cutting up little foam squares, and it's much easier just to die cut them all out, glue them together, and then stick the sentiment on top. Much neater, much more professional looking. And they won't warp in the post. And a nice basic hello can be used for anything. It can be used for birthdays, just a general hello, how you doing? Anything really. Just popping a little bit of weight on there because there was a few layers in that. And there you go. So now for the mechanism on the inside, we need to glue it to the bottom and the front of the card. So I always like to make sure I know exactly where the gift card sits so I know that I'm gluing the correct portion. Because there's nothing worse than finding you've glued the wrong bit to the wrong part of the card. So here I'm just showing you that you can just use glue. But I have found that it is better to use red liner tape and glue together. So you need to line it up onto the right hand side of the fold, right up against the fold, making sure it's sitting flush on the two sides, and then close the card down. Show the card who's boss. And then burnish it really, really well. And there you go. Nice and easy and really, really effective. Can you imagine the recipient's face when they open it up? They'd be gobsmacked. Especially children, could you imagine? All right, I'm going to go into a different sort of technique here. I wanted to try something out to see if it would work. And it did. And I'm going to show you how to use a slightly different, thicker cardstock. I really wanted to use this paper out of the kit that I've been using for the gift cards. And it's slightly thicker. So I'm starting off with the same measurements. So it is still 4 1/4 by 6, scored exactly the same at a 1/2 inch, 1 1/4, 1 3/4, 2 1/2, 3 1/2, 4 1/4, 4 3/4, and lastly at 5 1/2. And it's on the pattern side. Now, because it is slightly thicker, for the mechanism to work effectively, you need to actually trim off about 2 millimeters from each of the short ends. I find that if you don't trim that 2 millimeters off, the mechanism doesn't work. It doesn't fold flat inside the card. And it creates a lot of unnecessary bulk. So you do need to trim it. And then the mechanism does work. The card still will be a little bit bulkier than when you use the thinner one, So that's how much you need to trim, just that little bit. It will still be a little bit bulkier, but it will still post, not a problem. So again, you fold along the score lines and burnish really, really well. It's important to really burnish with the thicker paper. And again, we're still using paper. We're not using cardstock here. It's just slightly thicker. I'd say it's probably around about 125 GSM. So we're putting score tape or double-sided tape, red liner tape on the two edges. These ones doesn't have to be really, really strong tape. It's just to secure the mechanism into the two box shapes. So score tape is perfectly fine. Fold up to the first score line, and then you miss the next score line and fold up from the third one and secure it down. And from the opposite end, remove the lining, miss the second score line and fold up on the third one to meet the other one, but not overlap. It has to meet it, but not overlap. Very important. And then fold, sort of make your two box shapes there by squeezing together. And then again, you push from side to side and burnish. This helps it to actually form, to fold flat in the card, to make the mechanism work. And then we can secure it for the gift card by using the tape. You can use a strong double-sided tape like score tape or red liner tape, but again, only up to the top. That little tool that I use to always take the paper off, that's from Creative Memories. It's really handy for getting the lining off. And then secure it down. And then the gift card goes in. And there you go, that's your mechanism out of the stronger paper, or thicker paper. Now, the techniques I wanted to show you are now going to come into play. So it's again a top folding card, 11 by 4 1/4, scored in half at 5 1/2. And we're making a bit of a Christmas scene. And we're going to make use out of what we have. But first I'm going to attach the mechanism because I wasn't sure how much bulk I was going to have on the front of the card. So I'm going to use a combination of the red liner tape and the glue. And my pattern on this one was directional, so I've had to make sure that it wasn't upside down. So I've got the upside down bit facing the back. Now pop a bit of glue on so we've got some wriggle room and a bit of extra sticky because it is stronger paper as well. Making sure I got it the right way around. To the right hand side of the fold. Pushing it down and then fold the top down. And burnish really, really well. And there you go. And all done. And now you're free to decorate. So what I'm going to be doing is making a fireplace. Now, I don't have a fireplace stamp and die, so I've got to make it from scratch. So I'm starting off with just a scrap piece of cream coloured textured card and just a generic brick stencil. This one I've had for a long time. I have no idea where I got it from, but Darkroom Door does one. There's quite a few companies that do brick stencils. For this one, I needed something that was quite small. And I'm using a textured cream card. And it actually gives a really cool effect. When I hold it up to the camera shortly, you'll see the effect it gives. It gives the effect of the brick texture. So here I'm using the Heffy Doodle low tack tape, and you can see I've used it before, so it is reusable. I'm using 3 Oxide inks, tea dye, vintage photo and aged mahogany. And I'll also bring in some black soot as well. And this is just a silicone mat that I cut up from Amazon. And it stops my ink pads from running around all over the table, so I don't have to hold it with my hands. Rather than buying the expensive ones. Got to save our pennies where we can. And I'm just using the sponge domed applicators with the wooden handle. And I'm just going to do a mix of all 3 for the bricks. And no pattern, just quite randomly. Because the bricks on my house are quite random in colours, quite sort of sandstony with a bit of red in there. So I've sort of followed sort of those sort of colourings. And you can see the low tack tape did a really good job of just keeping the ink in one specific area as well. And the black soot, I'm just sort of going to go around the edges because it's a fireplace after all. So unless it's a brand new fireplace, you're going to have some sort of like black areas where the soot has gone. So that's the beginnings of the fireplace. Can you see the stippling sort of effect that the cardstock gives? It was a bit tricky to see, but it is there. And then rather than cut them out by scissors, I'm just using these arch dies from Mama Elephant. To cut out the fireplace shape. And then backing that with a piece of black cardstock. And then just trim off the excess. That's an easy, basic fireplace. And then for all the woodwork around it, if you've got paper stock that has wood grain in it, go for it. That is the easiest way to do it. I do have some somewhere, but I thought while we're sort of explaining how to do things, why not show you an easy wood grain technique? The same browns that are in the bricks, just grab ink and lay it on the paper. Doesn't matter how you do it, any old way. It's not going to hurt the ink pads. If you want to blend it a little bit better with a brush or a sponge, go for it. You don't have to. You can leave it streaky because you're only using small portions of it anyway, so you're not going to notice. This is a technique, well, it's sort of using a little bit of a technique hack from cake decorating days. I'm just cleaning the brush off a little bit there because it was a specific brush for a colour, so I thought I'd better clean it off a little bit. Now to add the texture, the actual wood grain texture, this is where the cake decorating bit comes into it. I'm just using an old mouse pad because it is soft, but not too soft. You can use any tool that you have that has a sharp but not too sharp point. So any of your scoring tools, a ball tool that is small, it's like a small ball tool. Or a bone folder, anything like that. A biro that doesn't work anymore even. And then you're literally just going to draw lines in the paper. And they don't need to be straight. In fact, they're better off not being straight. I'm just showing you here with two different tools. There you go, that's wood grain. And you don't have to use oxide inks, use any ink. It doesn't matter. experiment, have a play. And then all we do from here is just trim off the bad bits. And then basically cut to shape, cut to size rather. And then glue them in place. Super easy. And I think that actually turns out better than having a stamp and die set. Because you can't get that brick texture in a die set. And if you don't want a perfectly straight edge, just get your scissors and just do like wavy lines. And then you have a distressed Oregon beam, for instance. So make do with the supplies that you have. You can see I've got a wavy line on my top of my mantelpiece there. So now just assembling the card. So my front panel there is the same as my card base. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Making sure I got it on the front. Yep, good. And I'm pretty happy with the size of that one. Way too much tape on that. I think I was totally thinking about something else. Now this is all from the paper set from Spotlight that I have been using. It's new this year to Spotlight. A Christmas scrapbooking set. And these are already pre-cut out. These little die cutouts. And all the paper and everything is really, really pretty. I'm just going around the edges just to make them so they're not so crisp white, and it's walnut stain in the distress ink that I'm going around with. And just popping them up onto some foam dots with the 2mm and the 1mm foam dots. And I've just popped the tree up a bit so it looks a bit taller than what it actually is. I'm just hiding where the trunk is behind the gnome. And I thought the top of the card looked a bit bare, so I've just popped some little Christmas ornaments there, and I'm just going to use a little sparkly pen like it's hanging down from the ceiling. And then I thought I'd already popped these 2 out of the paper. I might as well use them. So I thought I'll pop them on the inside. Be a bit more fun for the recipient. There you go. Can you see why it's my favourite style of pop-up gift card? It's pretty cool. And the sparkle pen hasn't come out in last video. So I had to make it come out in this video. Sorry. So these are the cards we made in part 3. I hope it was worth waiting for. I think it was. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Remember part 2 and part 1. Make a comment below about which card was your favourite. And which technique was your favourite? I'd love to know. And give them a try. I'll see you next time. Remember to subscribe. Bye for now.